Okay, so today we're going to talk about the PACE chart and how the chart can actually help us understand the concepts of training that we're utilizing each and every day as we go out for our runs. So I'm going to work from left to right on this chart and explain how we utilize each of the columns, and I think you'll walk away with a much clearer understanding when you read your schedules or you head out for your runs. The column L is the VDOT. All that is a functional column that helps drive all the statistics that are within the chart. So you kind of can ignore the VDOT. I've also hidden the names of athletes just for privacy purposes. As we move from left to right, you'll notice that the paces essentially work from slower paces to faster paces. And so in columns N, O, and PQ, you'll see recovery, half steady, and steady range. Anytime on your schedule you see recovery, half steady, or steady range, you can refer to the chart and very clearly understand what the day is. So if it's a recovery day, this will often come the day after a hard workout, or maybe after a race, or maybe it's just something you back off to because you're feeling a little fatigued. This is a pace at which I really don't want you running any faster than. And these are the days when it's recovery where pace really doesn't matter. You're just getting out for time or mileage on your feet. Half steady is something that we use within a steady run and also sometimes as people are learning how to run steady runs. So to utilize it in a half steady run, what I'll usually say is the first half mile to a mile of a steady run doesn't really matter to me. You're just getting loose. By the end of the second mile, you should probably already be down to the half steady pace. And then over the remaining mileage, you're working in small chunks to negative split down into the steady range where the bulk of your miles, or maybe at least half of the run, are spent in the steady range. The other way we might use a half steady run, is on a day that there's a steady on the schedule, but you just don't really feel up to it. Maybe you're fatigued and you don't really need a full recovery run, but you're like, hey, I'm just going to back off and run a half steady run today. Still very effective training, just not quite as effective as the steady range. As we move into the threshold pace columns, the column you will most use in this section is column W for the mile. We use threshold pace mostly for sustained efforts. So think anytime that we're going to do 10 minutes or more of work might be broken, like a 10-minute with a little rest and another 10-minute, or it could be a sustained tempo run or threshold run where you're doing a 20-minute sustained effort. And you would refer to that mile column within threshold pace, and that's the pace you would run that threshold portion of the workout at. We rarely utilize the 1200, 1800, 400, 100 columns in this section because when we do those distances, we typically are using critical velocity for those workouts, which I will get to in a minute. Power runs are a very specific pace that we utilize when we do a 2 mile power run. And for those that know, we do this somewhat regularly, usually one time per training cycle, which is about 3 or 4 weeks. And you'll notice that the paces are just slightly faster than threshold pace because we know that it's sustained, but we also know we're only going for 2 miles. Critical velocity, this is really threshold training, but at a slightly faster pace because we know we're going to do it in repeats where we have rest periods in between the repeats. So this could look like 400s or 800s or thousands or 1200s or miles or any distance really. It also could come to life in a fartlek workout where there's rest periods in between. And when we use critical velocity, it's slightly faster than the threshold pace because we know we're getting those recoveries. And this workout tends to have very short rest periods in between, as does threshold anytime we are doing a sustained effort. 5K pace repeats. This is where max VO2 comes to life for those of you that wonder about max VO2. We typically will hit this range or this type of workout once per training cycle. And the one thing that I do with our training is I tend to get of a little bit more recovery than most coaches do on the 5K pace repeats because my real goal is to get the work in, but be able to come back the next day with a steady run. The key on these workouts is whatever distance we're doing, if it's 1600, 12,000, 8, whatever, that we're taking enough recovery and we're not overrunning the pace. We typically on these would start at the pace that is prescribed in the chart on the first repeat and then negative split very slightly over the course of the workout. So let's use 5 by 1000 as an example. On a 1000, we would probably take 4 minutes of recovery in between, which is quite a bit of recovery. So that's what makes this not kind of a going to the well sort of workout. And we would run the first 1000 if we're following the top row in this chart in 3:45. And then following that 3:45 after we take our 4 minutes recovery, the next one we would want to run roughly in 3:43, maybe 3:42, and then the next one in maybe 3:40. So very small increments of negative splitting over the course of the repeat workout. 2 mile race pace repeats, we utilize this usually with mixed workouts where we might run some critical velocity or some sustained threshold work, but then finish the workout off with some 2 mile race pace repeats. Could be 200 meters, 300 meters, 400 meters. We rarely utilize the 600 meters, but it's there in case we ever do. This is really your leg turnover where we're trying to make sure that we inject some speed in micro doses. Again, we utilize this with mixed workouts. And then the final piece that is not on the chart, but very important to think about is it is very important that we still do hit speed and we do so in a microdosing way that doesn't steal from our other training. And we tend to do that 1 to 2 times a week with strides. And when you're doing strides, it's roughly a 100-meter stride where you're accelerating to about 70 meters. And then over the last 25 or 30 meters, you are at about 95% of a sprint. So very fast work, but very micro-dosed. If you do just 4 strides twice a week for 52 weeks, it adds up to roughly 20 miles of speed workout in the course of a year, which is really plenty. And in addition, this is about consistency of exposure, not going to the well and pushing yourself really hard in the speed. So I hope this helps give you a better understanding of how to read the pace chart and also the concepts that we're deploying in our training.